extradition of Khomeini to other places. And at the same time, the secret services of the United States and Israel declared war on Iran, and this is the clandestine war between these two forces.
Iran was a free country. One has to remember, under the Shah, very advanced, very Western, very scientifically very impressive. It was taken over by this regime of fundamentalism and really black night that came over Iran. So definitely America stands and works for the values that Iran is against. But there's a special role for Israel here. Iran uses rhetoric that we haven't heard for decades. Eliminating Israel, Israel should not exist, has no right to exist. Israel, I quote, is a cancerous tumor that should be removed from the Middle East. It's said again and again. So when you see a country that says you are not legitimate, you will not exist in the end of the game here, and we go nuclear, and involved in terror like no other country, to put it in an understatement, is a cause for concern.
Folks, let me encourage you, go to aclj.org. Subscribe to our newsletters also. You can sign up for those at the website at aclj.org. Then support the work of the ACLJ. You can do that by simply going over to aclj.org and make sure, it's really important as we continue to expand our social media platforms, that you sign. We have about collectively, I think, almost 8.5, almost 9 million people between our Facebook pages. We've got hundreds of thousands on Twitter, Periscope, which is now Twitter, and also, of course, on YouTube. That's grown to almost 300,000 subscribers. Continue to support the work of the ACLJ, aclj.org. Only when a society can agree that the most vulnerable and voiceless deserve to be protected is there any hope for that culture to survive. And that's exactly what you are saying when you stand with the American Center for Law and Justice to defend the right to life. We've created a free, powerful publication offering a panoramic view of the ACLJ's battle for the unborn. It's called Mission Life. It will show you how you are personally impacting the pro-life battle through your support. And the publication includes a look at all major ACLJ pro-life cases, how we're fighting for the rights of pro-life activists, the ramifications of Roe v. Wade 40 years later, Planned Parenthood's role in the abortion industry, and what Obamacare means to the pro-life movement. Discover the many ways your membership with the ACLJ is empowering the right to life. Request your free copy of Mission Life today online at aclj.org/gift. The challenges facing Americans are substantial at a time when our values, our freedoms, our constitutional rights are under attack. It's more important than ever to stand with the American Center for Law and Justice. For decades now, the ACLJ has been on the front lines, protecting your freedoms, defending your rights, in courts, in Congress, and in the public arena. And we have an exceptional track record of success. But here's the bottom line. We could not do our work without your support. We remain committed to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. That remains our top priority, especially now during these challenging times. The American Center for Law and Justice is on your side. If you're already a member, thank you. And if you're not, well, this is the perfect time to stand with us at aclj.org, where you can learn more about our life-changing work. Become a member today, aclj.org. The fact of the matter is, Iran still is a threat. And what this movie shows you is the nature and scope of that threat. And we've got to be really clear that Iran is both a regional and geopolitical threat. Not because just of their nuclear ambitions, but their desire to export terrorism around the globe. They view themselves as establishing the Islamic Caliphate. That's what this is all about at the end of the day. And we have to be cognizant of that fact. That is what we're dealing with when we deal with Iran. This is a great special for you to understand the nature and scope of what our country faces, what our allies face.
Is your sense that the goal here of Iran is simply the desire to annihilate Israel? They talk about that openly. They say, we want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. But they really are looking much broader than that, aren't they? I mean, Israel is kind of in the way from the rest of the conquest.
Yeah, the main reason for trying to achieve a nuclear capability is to be able to cope with Israel and probably to destroy Israel. Because once they will have such a bomb, they will face a very, very huge temptation to use it. And I think that they might use it. I don't want to be like a rat in a lab, waiting to see either the Iranians will use the bomb once they have it, or they will not use it.
Nobody knows whether they would use it. Normally speaking, one assumes that if somebody is producing a weapon, they have the intention of using it. But in the nuclear field, it's different. The United States and the Soviet Union produced nuclear weapons for scores of years, but they never used them. And there was a mutual deterrence, as you know. So whether Iran would want to use the weapon, I do not know. I think they themselves do not know yet. But they certainly would like to have the option of having such a weapon, as I said, in order either to use it in certain circumstances, or to use it as a threat to extort from countries in the region concessions which they would like these countries to make on the political field, on the strategic field, on the economic field, and on other fields.
I think that the Iranians have shown, have demonstrated a pragmatic and rational policy when the regime was under threat of annihilation. They know that Israel would strike them back with nuclear weapons. They know that Israel would put them back to the Stone Age. And from their point of view, their survival in the regime, in this rotten, corrupted regime, is the sole or the central reason. Therefore, I don't think that they would use it only if they're back to the war. However, Israel and the United States should do whatever they can to prevent Iran from being nuclear, from getting the nuclear capability, because A, it would prevent any sort of retaliation against Iran. Second, Iran would become completely rogue in its support to jihadist groups. Third, it would start a nuclear war race in the Middle East. And you know, this is something you know where you start. But once Sunni, so-called moderate countries like Egypt, like Jordan, like Algeria, like Saudi Arabia would acquire a nuclear weapon, this is going to be a very unpleasant place to live in.
There is a way to put the Iranian regime, first of all, in a dilemma, whether to become nuclear or to survive. And by putting this regime in the dilemma, I believe that at the end, they prefer to survive. And it should be a strategy consist of 4 elements. Political isolation of the regime, crippling economic sanctions, Western support to the internal opposition in Iran, and a credible military option to convince the Iranian regime that there is no way to escape or to get away with a nuclear option. And as Supreme Leader Khamenei in 2003 decided to suspend the military nuclear option when he saw that he might be targeted in the third phase of the American offensive after 9/11, as he preferred survivability, I believe that again they will prefer survivability.
Is this a war we win or can win? The war with Iran.
This is a war that we can win if we are stubborn and not let the other side have the upper hand in the initiative. This is a war that if the United States and Israel are persistent, can be won. But in order to win this war, the threat must be truly perceived. And I'm not sure that by all Americans, and by all Europeans for that sake, the extent of the threat is well perceived and understood.
Well, first of all, you call the enemy what it is. Sun Tzu, who's the great military philosopher and theologian of ancient China, wrote that if you don't know your enemy, you will lose to your enemy. So first of all, you've got to name the enemy.
And I hope that the American people will educate themselves what a Sharia is, what Islam is, and what the purpose is.
The United Nations is not going to stand up to radical Islam. The United States has to lead pro-Western democracies with that Judeo-Christian foundation to what those democracies are all about, and realize that's the future for all of us.
anti-government protests in Iran growing more violent by the day with no signs of letting up. It's the biggest uprising in Iran since 2009 during President Obama's first year in office.
Breaking news on Iran and those demonstrations that we've seen there with a number of people killed over the last few days, demonstrations against the government across a number of different towns and cities.
President Trump turned to Twitter to talk about the protests that we are seeing. Let's take a look at that. Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them by the Obama administration. The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. They are hungry for food and for freedom. Along with human rights, the wealth of Iran is being looted. Time for change.
We have seen protests springing up around the country, and that is the really key point about these protests. It's not the urban elite that are taking to the streets. It's the regime's conservative base as well. The crackdown also appears to be intensifying. Iranian state media reporting hundreds of people have been arrested and at least 20 people killed. There is a real tension in Iran between the stagnant economy and the people there and the regime's ability to deliver on some of the economic promises that they have offered in the past.
This regime tries desperately to sow hate between us, but they won't succeed. And when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again. I wish the Iranian people success in their noble quest for freedom.
If the Iranian dictatorship's history is any guide, we can expect more outrageous abuses in the days to come. The UN must speak out. In the days ahead, we will be calling for an emergency session, both here in New York and at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. We must not be silent. The people of Iran are crying out for freedom. All freedom-loving people must stand with their cause. The international community made the mistake of failing to do that in 2009. We must not make that mistake again.
Subscribe to our newsletters also. You can sign up for those at the website at aclj.org. They support the work of the ACLJ. You can do that by simply going over to aclj.org and make sure, it's really important as we continue to expand our social media platforms, that you sign up. We have about collectively, I think, almost 8.5, almost 9 million people between our Facebook pages. We've got hundreds of thousands on Twitter, Periscope, which is now Twitter, and also, of course, on YouTube. That's grown to almost 300,000 subscribers. Continue to support the work of the ACLJ, aclj.org. For decades now, the ACLJ has been on the front lines, protecting your freedoms, defending your rights, in courts, in Congress, and in the public arena. The American Center for Law and Justice is on your side. If you're already a member, thank you. And if you're not, well, this is the perfect time to stand with us at aclj.org, where you can learn more about our life-changing work. Become a member today, aclj.org. AM 600 WBOB Jacksonville, 101.1 FM W266CX, Brimco. Talk.
With SRN News, Samrat Thomason in Washington.